know what your name means? Is your name easy for people to pronounce? Or is it a very unusual name that a lot of people have not heard of? Hello everyone, I'm Kathleen Pelly. Welcome to Journey with Story. Today's story is about a poor miller's daughter, a greedy king, and a funny little man who has a very unusual name indeed. Oh, in case you're wondering what a miller is, it's a person who uses a mill to grind grain into flour. This is an old fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm. Before I begin, I would like to ask mums, dads, grandparents, teachers, all you grown-ups out there, whether you are a first-time listener or whether you're a loyal weekly listener, if you do like this podcast, can you please take a moment to rate, review, or share it with others who might enjoy it? Thanks ever so much. Let's take a journey with a Rumpelstiltskin. Once there was a poor miller who had a beautiful daughter. Now it happened that the miller was going to see the king, and so as to make himself appear as a person of importance, the miller boasted to the king, "I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold." This delighted the greedy king, who at once told the miller, "If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her tomorrow to my palace so that I can see for myself what she can do." When the girl was brought to the king, he took her into a room brimming with straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a reel, and said, "Now set to work, and if by tomorrow morning early you have not spun this straw into gold during the night, you will die." Then he locked the door and left. Of course, the poor girl had no notion of how to spin gold from straw, and she began to sob pitifully. All at once, the door opened, and in came a little man who said, "Good evening, Mistress Miller. Why are you crying so?" "Oh, alas," answered the girl, "I have to spin this straw into gold, and I do not know how to do it." "Well, what will you give me," said the mannikin, "if I do it for you?" "My necklace," said the girl. The little man took the necklace, seated himself in front of the wheel, and whir, 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 3 turns, and the reel was full. Then he put another on, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the second was full too. And so it went on until the morning, when all the straw was spun, and all the reels were full of gold. By daybreak, the king was already there, and when he saw the gold, he was astonished and delighted. But he was so filled with greed that he took the miller's daughter into another larger room, brimming again with straw, and he commanded her to spin that also into gold by daybreak, or she would lose her life. Again the girl began to weep with despair, when the door again opened, and the little man appeared and said, "Well, what will you give me if I spin that straw into gold for you?" "The ring on my finger," answered the girl. The little man snatched the ring, and he again began to turn the wheel, and by morning he had spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king rubbed his hands with glee to see such a sight, but still he was not satisfied, and he had the miller's daughter taken into a still larger room full of straw, and said, "You must spin this too in the course of the night, but if you succeed, you shall be my wife." "Even if she is a miller's daughter," thought the king, "I could not find a richer wife in the whole world." When the girl was alone, the little man came again for the 3rd time and said, "What will you give me if I spin the straw for you also this time?" "Oh, I have nothing left that I could give," answered the girl. "Then promise me, if you should become queen, your first child." "Who knows whether that will ever happen," thought the miller's daughter, and not knowing how else to save herself from her plight, she promised the little man what he wanted. And for that, once again, he spun the straw into gold. When the king came in the morning and found all as he had wished, he and the miller's daughter were married. A year later, the girl had a beautiful child, and she never gave a thought about that little man until one day he suddenly appeared in her room and said, "Now, give me what you promised." The queen cried out in alarm, No, I cannot give you my dearest child. Please, you can have all the riches in the kingdom, but just leave my child alone." But the little man was not so easily pleased. No, he said, "I want something that is living. That is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world." The queen began to weep and wail so long and so hard that the little man took pity on her. "Very well, here is what we will do. I will give you 3 days to find out my name, and if you can tell me my name by then you can keep your child." So the queen thought the whole night of all the names that she had ever heard, and she sent a messenger over the country to inquire far and wide for any other names that there might be. When the little man came back the next day, the queen began to guess. "Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar," she said, followed by a whole list of all the names she knew, one after the other. But to every one the little man shook his head, saying, "No, that is not my name." On the second day, the queen sent a messenger out into the surrounding neighbourhood to find the names of the people there, and she repeated to the little man some of the most uncommon and curious names. "Perhaps your name is Short Ribs, or Sheepshanks, or Laceleg?" But always he answered, "No, that is not my name." On the third day, the messenger came back again to the queen and said, "I have not been able to find a single new name, but as I came to a high mountain at the end of the forest where the fox and the hare bid each other good night, there I saw a little house, and before the house a fire was burning, and round about the fire quite a ridiculous little man was jumping. He hopped upon one leg and he shouted, 'Today I bake, tomorrow I burrow, the next I'll have the young queen's child. Ha ha, glad am I that no one knew, Rumpelstiltskin is my name.'" So the next day when the little man came in and asked, "Now, Mistress Queen, what is my name?" The queen said, "Is your name Conrad?" "No." "Is your name Harry?" "No." "Well then, perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin?" The little man screeched and stamped his feet in a terrible fury before storming out the door, never to be heard of again. So, how do you feel about Rumpelstiltskin? Do you feel a little sorry for him? Or do you think it was okay for the queen to break her promise to him? That might be a good discussion to have with your friends or your family. Maybe there are times when we do have to break a promise. Oh, maybe you can find out a little bit more about your own name. What country does it come from? What does it mean? And what is the most unusual name for a boy or a girl that you've ever heard of? You can share with me at www.kathleenpally.com. I love to hear from my listeners. And thanks to all of you who have taken a moment to rate, review, and share this podcast with others. I do appreciate that. Cheerio then. Join me next time for Journey with Story.